So it feels really good to not be in difficult, abstruse, classical metaphysics anymore, right? Now all of a sudden we're back on Earth. We're talking about things that we all recognize. Having friends, being good friends. Yeah, we're talking about things that are immediately recognizable in a way that a lot of our questions for a long while have not been immediately recognizable. My mission for today is to show you that the various questions. Okay. My mission for today is to show you that the various questions that this is where you're at. Is to show you that the various questions that we've been asking, although apparently really esoteric and abstruse, good word by the way, are actually going to help us answer this question of what is a good friend. So I could just tell, like in all of your responses, I could see like I felt like I could hear a sigh of relief. I felt like I could hear a yes, finally, a question that we all want to answer, and one that we understand the principles on how to answer, and one that we have like immediately related to our experience in a way that we haven't for a little while, which was good, and we had a lot of really interesting answers. So, first thing that I'd like to do, there's a couple ways that I want to get into this. First thing I'd like for you to do, we're going to do a new kind of exercise, very brief, low stakes. Please, everybody, get out a piece of paper. No, no bubble tea. We've given up on the bubble tea for reasons. All right. I know. I love them. All right, take out a piece of paper. Everybody. And I'm going to put, this should be easy because we all just answered the question of what is a good friend. Yesterday, you all submitted your answers. So this exercise is called free writing. What it is that I'm going to do is I'm going to put, 2-3 minutes on the clock, and I want for you to don't pick up your pen, don't from the page, and just write just everything that's on the brain, answering the question of just list off properties of a friend, list off properties of a good friend, and this will give you a kind of immediate store of the things that came to mind, which will be useful as we get into this discussion. So I'm going to go ahead and just put a couple minutes on the timer, and you don't need to meditate on it or anything. Like you've already done a fair bit of meditating on it. So begin. time. All right. So let's take what it is that you have, break into our static groups that we have. Here, 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 here. I guess all of you back there, up here. And let's take just a minute or two just to discuss what it is that you all have. Try, just designate one person as scribe. There's one person whose job it is to collate commonalities and to note out, really interesting things that have shown up within your group. And let's get from each of the groups, please go ahead and locate 5 things that you all are able to agree on were characteristic features of a friend or characteristic features of a good friend. So, all right, break them into your groups and start doing that.
I just listened to like 10 like attributes and just like said like that sort of thing. Like I said stuff like loyal, trustworthy, loving, you have to wish well for them and they wish well for you. I'm really reciprocate, reciprocate they give much attention.
About 1 more minute here. Good. You guys have your 5?
Yeah.
Nice. Nice. Good job. Good work. And time. Okay, let's hear from our groups. Our nicely processed answers that we have here. And I want to separate these into 2 different kinds of answers. What is a friend anyway? So things that pertain to friendship just per se, and then things that pertain specifically to good friendships. These are clearly different This is a distinction that I think a lot of you made in your answers. So let's, and I didn't ask you specifically when you guys were listing off your five, whether it is that this was something that, to make such a distinction. So as we're going through the various answers, we'll place them into their buckets, okay? Let's start with you guys. Let's hear who's the scribe. Brian? Okay, that's okay. Do you have them in mind? Okay, let's hear it. What did you have, and let's talk about what buckets they fit into. Mm-hmm. Okay, so a kind of mutual enjoyment. We're drawn to one another in some way. Is this, do we think, a characteristic of specifically good friends, or is this a characteristic of friendship in general? Friendship in general? Can we think of an example where, an example of friends where we don't like each other, or we don't desire to spend time with one another? Jacob and Avery? Mhm. That's vicious. I love it. That's so spiteful, Jacob. I love it. It's great. Okay, but do we say that they're a friend? I mean, you like being around them, but not qua them. You like, or rather, you like being around them, but not in virtue of anything positive about them. You like being around them because you love what it feels like inside to feel so much better than them, right? Or to feel so much cooler than them, or something of the sort. You love the feeling inside of like how much they suck. But I don't know if we would call it a friend. You like being around them, which is, I think that's a good point, but it's maybe we then like refine the definition a little bit and say like, you like being around them. It has something to do with some positive quality about them. Is that fair? Do we think? The mutual, because otherwise we would be able to say enemy falls under that definition. You like being around them because they suck, and you love that feeling that they suck. So what if we say one characteristic, and do we agree? Avery, I think you actually talked specifically about this in yours. Do you want to weigh in on this before it goes up on the board? Good.
Well, I think like good family, for example, is a good friend.
One more time. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But that seems like a super broad definition of friendship, because, like, I mean, which doesn't mean it's necessarily bad, but it seems like it's like super broad. Because if that's the case, what you've said is a friend is somebody who you share relations with. In some respect, like you share a spatial relation with the people who are in the class next door, and I mean, you don't even know them, so it's like you're not friends with them. Similarly, like, you share a certain kind of like relationship of like kind of like lateral conversation like across the class with like people over here, but they're not necessarily your friends. Not that you hate them or anything, but they're not necessarily your friends, and you're able to draw a clear distinction between the people who you would say the word friend about and the people who are just kind of like incidental, or like, like we would draw a distinction between friend and acquaintance, and maybe what it is that you're getting at when you say like a friend is somebody you have any kind of relationship with is what you're really defining as an acquaintance,
Yeah.
Okay, so like, okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, something about, there's a specific kind of relationship, maybe. So what we said is like, you have any relationship with somebody, you're acquainted to them, like in the loosest sense. And friendship is something that's more specified than that. And it involves something like, to go with what it is that you guys are picking up on, it involves something like there's some kind of there's some kind of positive characteristics of the person in virtue of which you then desire to be around them. And this is what allows us to then say enemy doesn't fall under that definition. Otherwise, if I just like being around them, then enemy could fall under that definition because I'm a spiteful person. So what if we just throw up here, there's some kind of desire to be with in virtue of something about them. Are we okay with this, Cam? What do you mean? Sure, yeah. And this seems like it's a redescription of good faith, bad faith has to do with in good faith, it's because I'm directed towards something good about them. And in bad faith, it's because I'm directed toward really myself through something bad about them. So I'm gonna throw this up on the board real quick. Is this a modification for this or is it another thing? Okay, continue.
So what if it's I feel your two families we're always hanging out together. You had a kid your age, right? You grew up with them, and you kind of grew apart over the years. It's not somebody you want to see, but it's somebody you still consider a friend. You don't really want to spend time with them, but you still consider them a friend if you saw them.
So. Okay, that makes sense. It seems like you don't hate being around them, but you're not making a positive effort.
Yeah.
So we might include that. This looks like a limit case. It looks like we might, in some respect, out of habitual acquaintance, in another respect, it's not the worst thing being around them. So we might call this a certain kind of limit case. So yeah, that's good. So let's throw up here. First thing is there's a desire to affiliate. On account of, we'll just throw up good faith, so that we're really saying on account of something positive about them. There's something about them that makes it enjoyable to be around them. And friendships, which are a relationship, means that we together have found something positive about one another that leads us to desire to be around one another. Okay, so please continue.
Is well on their friends without a selfish motive.
Okay, so some kind of wishing well is going on. I think Eli, you talked about this a little bit in your answer, a certain kind of characteristic of what it is that's basic to friendship in general is some kind of there's some sort of well wishing. I desire what's good for my friends in some respect, and that desire can have different degrees of intensity depending on what it is I'm willing to do about it. And you use this to distinguish then between a friend in general and a good friend. A good friend doesn't think about it. Yeah. Okay. So I think that's good. I think and I don't know if we necessarily need to hash that out in any particular way. I think we all understand this this experience of wishing well, desiring the good for the other person. So let's throw this up on the board as well. Okay. Let's hear the rest. Okay. So there's some kind of we expect some kind of back and forth. Actually, before it is that we continue with you guys, we talked about this a little bit in your group. So there's some kind of I wish well for the other, and at the same time, kind of reciprocity where both of us are wishing well for each other. Can you talk about what it is that you guys talked about in your group about reciprocity and altruism?
We said in regular friendship, some sort of value provided, and regular friendship is almost as it's expected to be returned. Within a good friendship, that reciprocity isn't necessarily expected.
Okay, so we have a couple different relationships to reciprocity in that case. You could say in a friendship, just in a friendship in general, there's what we can't have is it be totally one-sided. Where there's no. So this looks like it's a kind of a qualifying of this desire for the good for the other person, and also a desire to affiliate with the other person. If you have one person who's the only one who's ever trying to spend time, the only one who actually wants to see something good in the other person and wants to be with them, or only one person who is, trying to do good for, or is the only one person who's wishing the good for the other. It doesn't look like we have a friendship. It looks like we have, one person idolizing another person, something of this sort. We don't have, so reciprocity looks like it's like, baked into like our basic concept of friendship. So a paradox we'll need to get into that you hit on, like with that this reciprocity kind of like gets fuzzier as we get into what it is we might recognize as a good friendship, where we're not sort of like keeping tabs on like debts or anything of the sort, keeping tabs on like, I did XYZ last time, now it's your turn. Like the kind of economic reasoning sort of kind of like melts away in some respect when we get into a good friendship, where it could be the case that that one person is like sort of unilaterally related to the other one for some period of time, but there's maybe a kind of trust that it's all going to come out in the wash. So let's say, so this is a paradox, this reciprocity and this altruism. So let's go ahead and just say here, we'll use it as a qualifier for these other ones. So there's a kind of reciprocity. Okay, this is good. Let's hear the rest from you guys. Just list them off, please. Okay. Okay. It seems like we could probably resolve this into these ones that we have here. This like willing the good for, and this like desire to affiliate or something of the sort. So the giving much and asking for little, maybe this gets us going toward what it is that we have said might be a characteristic of a good friend, which is some kind of like, we might call it like an altruism, or some kind of like self-sacrifice, some kind of like directedness toward like the good of the other person, even in some respect to like the expense, or in looking at that as opposed to looking like to my own good, and something like this. A kind of like maybe other directedness or altruism can be a little word that we use for it. Is that fair, do you think? To throw that up there? So let's say maybe like a really good friend is one who's, we'll use this word altruistic, or we'll qualify it and say self-sacrificial, maybe. And we'll have to talk a little bit more about what that means. So I'm going to jump over here. Let's hear what it is you guys have. Who's the scribe? Maybe the scribe. All right.
The first one that I really found out was loyalty over time. And just really representing that they're there for you for a long amount of time than just for me at least.
Yeah. In terms of which bucket do you want to place that in terms of like friendship per se, or in terms of a good friendship?
I would say that that's a good friendship. But
yeah.
I think that is the best similar to that. And I think that without loyalty in a friendship, I think it's really hard to build any relationship in the first place. But I think that also the is just kind of higher tier of loyalty, or just higher tier of just understanding each other through time.
Okay. So maybe we include loyalty of two different sorts. Maybe we could say, do we think loyalty could maybe be dissolved into these other two things that we have, or resolved rather?
I think the desire to affiliate, I think the desire to good for it's like you want them to be good. I think it's also like you just do that.
Well, I want what's good for them. Like, so it seems like maybe sort of like bearing this out over a long period of time. What's up?
Not just desiring it, but like actually doing the actions that like
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let's. Where do you guys think that this? Which bucket do you think this needs to go into? Friendship proper, or a specifically good friendship? Can we have a good friendship? First of all, we can't have a good friendship without loyalty. I think that's fair. I think we can all agree on that. Can we have a friendship without loyalty? degrees of loyalty, and also loyalty seems like it has like a temporal component where it has to do with like it's sort of borne out in time, like over like some extended period. So Jacob and Grace, Stephen, let's hear all three in a row. Jacob. Okay. All right.
I was just gonna give an example of like the friendship that does require loyalty. Like I have friends across campus that like I had one last freshman year and that semester, like I'm not in touch with them since, but I still see them like every day. I consider them to be like a friend of mine. It's like loyalty has not played a big role in that at all, but like it's still my friend. So I don't think like loyalty necessarily involved in a friendship.
Okay.
It's fine friendship.
Sure. Okay. Great.
Like speaking to that point, I think it depends on what you expect out of the friendship. So like, if you're on the same page that you know that this person isn't reliable, or like you know that this isn't that kind of relationship, and you both understand that it's not like you're not like confused by it, then it's totally fine.
Okay. So it seems like maybe we can agree on a certain kind of Brian, you have an addition to this? Particular point? Sure. Like dependent upon like what the expectations are of some sort. So let's say I think these are good sorts of cases of like it looks like we can like enjoy being around somebody, wish the good for them on some level, but not necessarily like have an occasion for or a need for like the expression of like a sticking with. And it seems like this is really to say like we can have superficial friends and we still call them friends. They're not just acquaintances, and yet loyalty doesn't seem like it sort of like opens up as like a necessary kind of part of this. So maybe we say that loyalty doesn't show up at the level of friend per se, but does definitely. I think we all agree it shows up at the level of a good friend. So let's go ahead. Let's say loyalty, because betrayal is like the opposite of an extended sort of mutual care and mutual love, which might be part of what it is we understand by friendship. Let's as opposed to going around for to hear everything that everybody has said, are there any for the scribes? Are there any additions that you guys had to this in terms of friend or good friend that are not on the board presently? What additions do you have, Gavin?
Or what makes them good?
Okay. How would you characterize this?
They're both similar to loyalty. If they are a good friend, they should care about your well-being. Surface level friend.
Okay, yeah, so we could say this is something that I think shows up two things. The empathy, and then second of all, common interests. It seems like common interests don't necessarily have to be included in all friendships, but certainly seem like they're a characteristic of some friendships, or of a certain kind of friendship. Empathy, I think, is really interesting. So, how does empathy add something to the desire of the good for and the desire to affiliate? What does empathy add? I think it adds something. So I'm not trying to trick you, but what do you think it adds? And empathy seems like it isn't just something that's like at the level of volition, at the level of like my desire for the good for somebody else, but there's a noetic element. It has something to do with I have a certain kind of knowledge about them. What I mean is that like I have a desire to get to know them and their like individual situation, and like to kind of like care for them and to kind of like pour into like their individual situation. So maybe we say like empathy adds like a desire, like not just a desire in general for the good for the person, but also a kind of like maybe a desire to get to know them like singularly. There, yeah. And then to like kind of and then to sympathize or to try to feel with them, get to know them at like this like individual personal level. So what if we? And I do think that is really different from just like because I've had plenty of friends who I have we have a raucous, wonderful time together, but I don't necessarily have a kind of like desire to like really get to know them like in their individual essence or anything of the sort. Nor do we sort of like sit and have like like big personal meaningful talks about like our like feelings and our like hopes and desires and things like this. But a good friend, it looks like that is kind of like a key characteristic. So maybe we can capture that unique kind of feature of a good friend under the term empathy. Is that fair? Yeah. Cool. All right. Let's toss that up here. What else do we have here? I think we can go ahead. We'll throw up here as well as a certain subcategory is like we have a feature of certain kinds of friendships is mutual interest, which I think we might want to say this has something to do with this kind of qualifies a desire to affiliate. I desire to draw close to these people in virtue of the fact that we want to do the same thing. So we'll include mutual interest. Cool. What else do we have?
So like one thing is that like honesty, like they tell you what you want to hear. Like, when somebody said that in our group, but like how there's some people like will just like tell you things straight up, whereas like a regular friend might not do that. Because that's how it's a relationship to be. So.
And it seems like to use some categories that we've used beforehand, I think a handful of you in your answers to this question associated what is a good friend and what is a good conversation and the kinds of like properties or the kinds of dialogical virtues that were characteristic of good conversation as like also features that would make a really good friend, which I think was an interesting sort of association. So maybe we could say like honesty was one of these virtues, but that like stepping out to go tell the truth even when it's uncomfortable features in both for honesty and for courage. So maybe we say like there's a certain kind of like so both of these look like they're like this being able to tell the hard truth is a feature of a good friend. What is like the background of being able to tell the hard truth? Like what is going on in that? I'm gonna write that on the board in a second. But what's going on in that?
I guess it's like a trust.
Yeah.
Like that you can tell them like the truth and that you're not trying to hurt them. I guess like or you're looking out for what's in their best interest. Like it goes back to the altruistic point. Like you're doing this for them. It's not just like bring them down or just say something to say something.
Maybe the distinction that we could have is like I'm not just trying to be like verbally pleasing. I'm not just like tickling their ears, but out of like an excess of the desire for the good for them, I'm trying to like pour into them and tell them like courageously and honestly what it is that is going to make them better. And subsequently, like in making them better is going to it's going to be what's good. It's going to be what's good for them. So I think speaking the hard truth is like a characteristic feature, I think, of good friends, which we can nicely cash out under honesty and courage. So let's throw up. What's a good word for this in this case? Like, I think can we say real talk? Maybe. Like, I think that's basically what we nicely described. Like, real talk, which has as its features, or has its preconditions, honesty and courage. Does it have other elements of this? Like, in as much as there's a certain kind of patience that looks like it's included as well. Like, I have patience with them, even when my friend is like going off on a bad track that's going to hurt him and hurt people around him. I speak honestly, I speak courageously, and I'm patient. Knowing like I don't, if I gave up immediately after I gave them like the straight talking to, I wouldn't be a good friend. So it seems like this, like, loyalty fits in really nicely in terms of patience. I'm patient with them. What do you think about this? Is this fair? Yeah. Nor is it the case that I'm just sort of like unilaterally went, like leaning into this and saying this is what it is you have to do. Because then I'm not a friend. Then I'm like a moral. Then I'm like a moralizer. Then I'm like exclusively. Bless you, Eli. Then I'm like exclusively just throwing out like these are my opinions on what it is you should do. Like seems like there's also, in line with empathy, I have some kind of like desire to understand what their situation is and why it is that they're doing what it is they're doing, and who it is that they are, and what they're up to and what their goals are. So in bringing in empathy, it also looks like there's like this gets at charity as well. Yeah. So it seems like I think this is me trying to like capture like our various dialectical virtues like show up here in terms of like the kind of communication that you have with a friend, with a good friend, distinctively. Honesty, courage, patience, charity. I forget what our last one was. Does anybody remember? Humility. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I totally forgot. Yeah, where again, I'm out of this characteristic of empathy, this desire to understand them in their individual situation, and a desire for the good for them in their individual situation. I also am allowing the possibility that I haven't understood yet, and that there's stuff that they're going through that I haven't really grasped. But I'm going to continue to will the good for them, and I'm going to continue to try to be able to like help them, like in and through whatever like the hard things that people go through. A good friend is able to be there in that unique way and is able to engage linguistically in this unique way. I saw your hand up a minute ago, Abby, and then you had a thing too.
Oh no, I was just gonna add on to what you said about the design for the
Yeah. Sweet. Okay, good. Yeah, you were on the right track.
I would say the biggest thing for me, is like, two big things, but one of them was already touched upon, was like communication of appreciation, like individual appreciation. But like number two would be always being genuine. Like keep on going back to like concrete people have in my life, like when we give friends, like I can ask a question that's like super nice and people just like, oh hello, like not like a fake hello, like not like that excited to see me, not that excited to see them, like like my good friend.
Right.
This morning it's just like I don't see, and like that's it, you know what I mean? Like super like not like a fake. I don't know. I just think, and like being genuine also goes into like holding you accountable, like when you're in the wrong, but also like when you're in the right, you'll recognize that like you're in the right. If it's especially if it's like in the right with like someone who knows the other person, like hey, you did something wrong to me, they'll like accept that. Like, yeah, you're correct. So I think like being genuine goes like touches upon like a lot of different things, and that's why it's like probably my biggest quality and good for them.
Yeah, it seems like being genuine looks like it's the converse of what it is we've described as empathy, which is really to say like empathy has to do with like I'm trying to like grasp them like in their their singularity in terms of like their personal life and their personal characteristics, genuineness seems like it has to do with like, and similarly, I'm trying to sort of like express myself to them from out of that, you know, as opposed to like putting on a putting on a face for the purpose of just being like sort of like pleasing in, you know, in like passing social situations. The difference between like sort of like flitting around at a party talking to individual people and like spending time with a person like one-on-one, like really trying to be able to like understand what's going on with them and trying to be able to like be really honest in terms of yourself with them. These seem like just behaviors that nicely differentiate friends.
It's like, it's interesting because I wouldn't like consider good friends to be friends. It's like really the that word means that like like friendly, like they might appreciate me. You don't have to be like fake nice to each other. You just be like dry.
Yeah. So this seems like this gets we said this earlier, but I didn't write it on the board. Like trust. There's a kind of like longevity to a good friendship that's built upon a mutual trust. And it seems like that trust. These things, they all sort of we're hovering around. You know, we're hovering around and describing a lot of different ways, like what it is that characterizes a good friend. You know, trust expresses that kind of like that longevity of friendship and that kind of ability to like know that we're still good, even if I'm not kind of like actively I'm not actively giving gifts. I'm not actively, you know, like talking up. I'm not actively, you know, doing X, Y, Z sorts of things. This is actually where like Eli, I think like your account, which says like a good friend is one who like acts for the good of the other person. Like there are different kinds of like we might want to draw a distinction here. There are different kinds of acts that are like for the good of the other person, and different sorts of goods for the other person. You know, my acting by like talking up or something of the sort might be superficial, and so be the characteristic actually not of a true good friend, but actually of just like, you know, like just baseline friend. You know, so there's a hierarchy of goods in terms of like the goods that I will for the friend. Some of them the good friend desires because they're like the true higher goods. Some of them any given friend would will because they're like more basic sorts of goods. I, you know, desire the good for my friend, and so I give them the last bag of the cool ranch Doritos, even though they are the superior Dorito. This would be, you know, I actually am acting out, like, and giving, like, I actually am willing to be good. But that's a, like, much more basic level good, even though it's a superior Dorito, it's a much more basic level good than the straight talk, which can actually be unpleasant. In the moment, it can actually be, like, not, like, the good in terms of pleasure, but it could be the good in terms of, like, helping to cultivate the character of the person. So, okay, this is, we're going to pivot just a little bit. I'm going to break them into groups. A couple things. I want to understand how a good friendship, or what it is to answer the question of a good friendship, relates to a few of the previous questions that we've asked. And I want to associate this. I'm going to motivate this for you by, you know, drawing out some of the things that we've talked about here. I think we just talked about a kind of like hierarchy of goods. There are different sorts of goods for a friend, different sorts of like or for a person, different sorts of pieces that can be different sorts of pieces within a human being. Willing the good for them in like an immediate pleasurable bodily sense, giving them the last bag of Cool Ranch Doritos or whatever, doesn't look like it's as essential as concrete as willing the good for them in terms of their character or in terms of like helping them to have right beliefs or something of the sort. I think that this points to, in some respect, if I'm willing the good for the person, there's a prior kind of question of like, what is a person? Which is a question that we've asked. So I think like what I'm trying to do is just show you how these questions relate. We've asked, what is a person? We've seen a handful of different kinds of, or what am I? We've seen a handful of different kinds of answers. If I was just a body that experienced pleasures and senses, then the good that a friend would will for the other, for their friend, seems like it would remain at that level. That would be all that would be the only good that I would be able to achieve. That would be, because that's all that I am. So a pure kind of like, we could just call it, we'll divide it into three pieces. In terms of what are you? That question that we had, what are you? We could see, maybe three broad kinds of answers. These are kind of the three broad answers that we saw in Thomas. We could see, I'm a mind, I'm a body, or I'm a mind or an intellect that is closely intertwined with the body. Now, these three things have to then do with three different sorts of ways that you're able to even relate to a friend. If we were just minds and I was willing the good for the other person, then the only acceptable activity, or like the main way that we would relate, for the good of the other person, would be in some just purely intellectual activities. What it would be to go have a good friend would be all we do is talk. Like dialogue would be the one thing that we would go do, because the most important, the essential thing about us, the essential thing about us being the good things that we are, which is what it is that friendship desires, what it is that friendship pushes toward, would be trying to make sure that we have like the right beliefs or something of the sort. There are certain kinds of friendships where it's like, yeah, like you spend time talking with one another, you spend time dialoguing. But we also have all recognized that's not the only thing that we do in even really good friendships. Are you guys tracking with like where it is that I'm going here? This makes a little bit of sense. Okay. So, so pure sort of intellectualism about the nature of the human being would correspond with a pure sort of intellectualism about what it is that friends would do in their association with one another, or what it is that we would expect friends to do in their association with one another. And we don't expect that the only thing that we do is dialogue. But it does seem like dialogue is something that's like a characteristic of the highest kinds of friendship, which is what it is we've talked about a little bit. Like the best sorts of friends are the ones who are able to direct you toward the truth, and the ones who care about your good in terms of whether it is that you're on the right track, like as a human being. The dialogue has something to do with it, like real talk has something to do with it. So again, it looks like a good friend isn't just somebody who you go and have fun with and go engage in like different, just purely physical activities, like I don't know, skydiving or something. Like a really good friend, if all you ever did was skydive, you would have a friend. But it looks like there would be another kind of aspect, another element of like the kind of closeness that you could have with another human being you wouldn't have if you were chilling with some dude skydiving, every day, as we all do. We all skydive every day. Skydiving with this dude every day, but you know nothing about him. You guys never talk. You never have real talk. You never try to like engage sort of intellectually or spiritually with this person through language, through conversation. Then the friendship would have a certain kind of like intrinsic wall. There'd only be just so far that you would have gotten. There's something about conversation that looks like it is like a feature of really good friendships. So therefore, there's something at the level of the intellectual. There's something at the level of the mind that is a characteristic feature of really good friendships. But like we said, it's not the only thing. It can't be the only thing. And we can truly have friends where what is it we do is we just like, you know, go drink together, like, and enjoy the kinds of like pleasures of the body, of going for runs, you know, or whatever. Like, so I point this out to you guys to say, all this stuff that we were doing, having to do with like philosophical anthropology and sort of fleshing out like what is a human being. This leads us then to be able to say what is good for a human being, given the kinds of things that we are, which then allows us to say, when we're trying to be good to our friends, which is what it is that we're all trying to do, we're trying to be good to our friends, we have to be good to our friends in virtue of the kinds of things that our friends are, which is to say, we're able to go have fun as bodies that we are, but we also recognize a certain kind of something that's important, something that's essential about the fact that we also are intellectual beings, that we're minded beings, and so we're able to engage at the level of minded beings. So I just wanted to point that specific thing out to you. At the level of, this will be a question. I'll just point this back to you because I've been talking for a long time now. At the level of empathy, how do we define empathy again, or how did we talk about empathy? Somebody? Anybody?
Something we want to get to the heart of the reasons why, personally, not just like situation.
Yeah. So at the level, thank you, Amit. So at the level of empathy, I want for you guys to consider here, and we're gonna get up into our groups, and I'm gonna give you guys a minute to discuss this. Our first question that we had was, what is the value of truth? We're seeing this show up in a different context now, which is, what is the value of truth, where what it is that I know is a friend. So what is the value, so I'll say again, what is the value of true knowledge, where the thing that I'm knowing, or the one that I'm knowing, is a person who I consider a friend, or a person whose friendship I desire. So this should make you consider value is going to mean something different, and this is a different way of phrasing this, question. So please, I'm going to say it one more time. What is the value of truth, where what it is that I have the truth about, or the one that I know truly, is a friend? That's the question. So I want for you guys to break one of your groups and discuss this for a minute, okay? Does that make sense? Do you guys want me to explain? Yeah. What's the value of possessing that truth? Of possessing possessing true knowledge of the friend, which is really the same thing as what we've seen now. That's really the same thing as empathy, of understanding them. You see? Does this make sense? You guys? All right. Break up into your groups. Take a couple minutes and discuss. I'm gonna write it up here.
I'm 15. No, I'm 15.
All right, let's come back here. Let's come back. Who's very confident about their answer? Let's hear it. Someone. Let's hear it.
I feel like having true knowledge of a friend is almost the base of what could make them a good friend. Like having that true knowledge, like it is making them expect you to be altruistic. They are being self-sacrificial and giving you that knowledge. They're giving that up to you. It like is the base of loyalty because they're expecting you to stay loyal by giving you that knowledge. They're like basically saying like I trust you to be loyal. Like you're going to be loyal, and also you guys trust that too because they're giving you the true knowledge themselves. They know they're becoming like almost vulnerable to you, so it's demonstrating trust. And it's also showing empathy, or it is allowing empathy, because the only way to empathize is to truly understand someone, to empathize, to put yourself in their shoes. And you can't do that if you don't have true knowledge of them. And then like empathy and loyalty are the base of real talk. You can't have real talk if you don't understand them, if you don't understand where they're coming from.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. So to sum up in that case, the value of truth with respect to the friend is the condition of having good friends. The condition of having good friends. So there's something about good friendship that has to do with like knowing this person in like an intimate way. Knowing them in an intimate way, not in terms of like, the appearances necessarily that they've like put up for others, but in terms of maybe a distinction between appearance and essence, knowing them like in their essence, in what they are. Yeah, I think that's really good. I think that's a really interesting answer. So what else do we have? Here, Steven.
I feel like knowing you have a good friend is kind of like an external way of acquiring self-worth in a way, because like you recognize that other people like appreciate your company, other people like care about you, are altruistic toward you, are loyal to you, etc. So like while like external things are not necessary to like understand like your place on the planet, it like still is like a great way to like recognize that. I feel like.
Yeah, so well, how does this pertain specifically to what is the value of truth with respect to?
Yeah, so the value is like, okay, like recognizing that other people like appreciate you and like want you around, and like the truth is that like.
Oh, the truth in terms of like their relation back to me.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
That makes sense. To get an intrapersonal perspective.
I think that's a good point, but there's a kind of like both. It's the case that the value of truth with respect to the friend is that truth is what it is that makes possible a true good friend in the first place. Second, it's to say, and in as much as this friend kind of reflects me back to myself, I see myself reflected in the friend. I know the truth about them, which is that, like, they're a damn good person. Like, I just, they're a delightful person, and they want to be my friend. And so then it does reflect back, like that recognition that you have with somebody somebody you respect. I know them, and I know that they are actually worthy of respect, and I know that they will do good for me and desire to affiliate with me. So yeah, you're right. I think so. There's the value of truth with respect to the friend might be both the ground condition for friendship, and it might be the ground condition for a certain kind of self-worth. In as much as we sort of like discover ourselves and discover ourselves as good, as worthy, as excellent through the estimation of others, who we have estimated to be excellent and worthy. Yeah, that's really good. Let me write these down really quick, and then Peter, you had your hand up first, and then Abby. All right. So the first thing is to say, what's the value of true knowledge with respect to the friend? The first one might be this is the condition. The condition of good friendship in general. I agree with you, Blake. I think that's a good account. It's a condition of good friendship in general. And it might be the value of true knowledge with respect to the friend might be the self-worth that comes with recognition by someone who's excellent, by somebody who we judge to be an excellent person. The self-worth that comes with recognition. I'll write it down. So the initially abstract question of what is the value of true knowledge when the object of that true knowledge is something good, you desire that true knowledge, and you desire it for itself, because knowing this good, excellent thing, this good, excellent person, is enriching and invaluable. Peter, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think you're really kind of getting at this, and I might be like, taking words out of your mouth and trying to change it. But I feel like the second point a lot, it kind of stems into this idea of like, at some point, a good friend, you do gain some utility, some pleasure from them.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like it's separate from like, what is a good friend? I think there's like this basic level of utility and pleasure we get, and then, what is a friend? I think there's a basic level of utility and pleasure we get, and that's different than a true friend in which we don't prioritize utility and pleasure, but that stems from a prioritizing of the empathy, loyalty, all those other values that kind of comes with it. And I think that utility and pleasure, I was kind of like talking about how it somewhat connects with what humans are wanting to be able to achieve. And that's kind of that final cause of like we have a very we have kind of this like final cause of having a natural tendency that we are coming to connect. And I think that the value of the true knowledge of friendship is that we can develop that connection by coming to figure out that true knowledge.
Yeah, Aristotle says that man is a social being, or a political being, is what he called it. So, like, connection with others is essential to us. I think like this, where it is that pleasure shows up in a couple different ways. I think this is a really good point. We talked about this in your group a little earlier. It's kind of a paradox, because it's both the case that with a good friend you have it's both the case that with a good friend you will the good for them, and you don't, without kind of like keeping tabs on like whether it is that there's reciprocity. And so it looks as though the desire for pleasure has kind of like fallen away, because I'm not sort of like advocating for myself necessarily in terms of like, because really it's just like the person's excellent, and I like to spend time with them and I like to get to know them because they themselves are excellent. So is this other focus, this what is it we were talking about, altruism, self-sacrifice, this other focus that's involved in like really close friendships, that looks like it's opposed to the kind of like desire to go and like accumulate pleasures where it's like self-focused, you know? And yet from out of this other focus, we actually like achieve, like there are higher pleasures, you know? I'm actually able to go acquaint myself with wonderful, delightful people. And it's in my focus on trying to understand and get to know the wonderful, delightful people in their own selves and to do good by them because they're great. That I'm able to then achieve, you know, higher, more refined kinds of pleasures, like having this close connection with somebody who's great. Kind of what it is that we were talking about in terms of like then the self, like the recognition from this other person, and that like the kind of new self consciousness that comes along with this, where it's like, wow, I just realized I just loved hanging out with this person because they were awesome, and I wanted to just understand them and I wanted to do good by them because they're great. And now all of a sudden I've recognized I'm in a community of wonderful people, which is great. So yeah, I think that's a really good point. There are higher pleasures that are that come through coming to understand and coming to know the truth about worthy persons. Abby, you had something?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask, like, what if a person is not like more like their essence isn't excellent? Like, what if they're like bad people? Like they're two bad people who like wish good for each other and like give each other a good fate, but like their essence isn't necessarily excellent. Is that still considered like a good friendship?
The question is, are they able to be good friends to one another? I think this is a great point. Are people who are not good able to be good friends with one another? I mean, I feel like I don't watch a lot of reality TV, but some of the reality TV that I've seen is just, you know, kind of like poorly, like people of poor character who spend a lot of time like tugging on each other's hair because they're angry. And spend a lot of time not understanding one another. And spend a lot of time being, you know, quickly offended. And spend a lot of time being, you know, like quick to judge and hasty and not charitable and like all of these various characteristics that look like they don't like allow the possibility of being able to go be a good friend. And what this really points to is it says like there's a certain kind of development of character that looks like it's necessary in order to be able to care for the other person.
So
you know?
like more like the your essence is like
I think so. I think this is as we'll talk about on Thursday. This is what Aristotle thinks too. Is you have people who are virtuous are able to be friends, good friends. People who are not virtuous, a big like you know a huge problem that comes with that is that you don't know how to be a good friend to other people. You know, because like you're vicious in different ways. Like your desires are all out of whack, and your ability to be able to like patiently relate to somebody else and to really to love someone else is compromised. So you often see like with you know vicious, you know tyrannical people, they have a really hard time maintaining friends, and the friends that they maintain are often shallow. Whereas with really like wonderful, excellent, well-developed persons, they have really deep friendships. A characteristic of like really good people often is like you see them late in life, and they have long-standing good friendships with people who are going to continue to give them straight talk, and et cetera, et cetera. And that is that is one of the rewards, one of the primary rewards of virtue for Aristotle is you get to go have good friends, which I find very compelling because none of us wants to be alone, and none of us wants to only have superficial friends. But in some respect, it's like kind of the level of virtue and the level of your character will be reflected in the kinds of persons who the kinds of persons who want to affiliate with you. All right, we're almost almost out of time, so I'm going to just ask you guys I'm asking you guys two more questions. One pertaining directly to our class, and then one for you to carry on with you. So the one that pertains directly to our class here is what we've seen, these various other questions that we've had on Tuesdays. Well, we've seen what are you shows up in some respect, because what you are is going to then going to pertain to what qualifies a good friend, or what sorts of activities a good friend will do. What kinds of activities a good friend will be able to participate in with another friend, with a good friend. We've seen what is a good conversation show up as one of those activities, one of the very essential activities of really good friends, in light of, as we're now able to say, in light of the fact that the intellectual is something that, although it's not all of our nature, is first within our nature, because it's the form of the body. And we've seen how it is that what is the value of truth also has reappeared in terms of the value of truth with respect to knowing a friend is the ground condition of being able to have a friend, being able to have good friends. Two things that'll show up here is to say what, in terms of what is our knowledge of God, Thomas, as we talked about, one way that he'll answer this question is to say, and this is like a characteristic of the great monotheistic tradition, specifically the Christian tradition, is to say our knowledge of God is not only intellectual, but there's a sense in which we might have a relationship to God as a relationship of friendship. This is a characteristic feature of the Christian tradition, is to say that the knowledge of God, or the affiliation with God, is a kind of friendship, a desire to draw close to, which is what we've seen as a feature of friendship. So I want to just clock that for you, which is, I think, a really interesting connection. And the last little piece is what is it to learn philosophy? When we consider the word philosophy and this word affiliation that I've put up here, this desire to affiliate, to draw close to, I've given you guys the etymology of the word philosophy in the past. It's a desire to draw close to Sophia, wisdom. The way that Plato defines talks about what a philosopher is a friend of wisdom, a desire to draw close to wisdom. So in philosophical friendships, as we'll see on Thursday, what we do is we draw close to wisdom together through conversation, and in the process have the highest kinds of friendships that we're able to go have. And that's the same thing as also talking about and learning philosophy. So my last question for you, then I'll just leave you all with this, is in light of the stuff that we've talked about today, I want for you all to think to yourselves, this is your homework, for you all to think to yourselves about what an excellent set of activities would be, given what we are, an excellent set of activities given what we are, to do with a friend in order to become good friends. And I want for you all to, at some point this next week, try to go engage in those activities. Go make good friends. All right, I'll see you all on Thursday, and we'll talk about Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics 8. See ya. Yeah, see you around. Thank you. Yeah, see ya. Hey man, I'll see ya. Bye-bye. See ya. I'll see you around. How you going? Take care, Alan. See ya. Thank you. See ya. See ya. See ya. Bye. Thank you. See ya.
I was gonna come by and just talk to you. I really have a few questions. That'd be alright.
Yeah, fine.
What's your office number?
I'll see it. I think it's, and you can just walk you there.
I was gonna try and get a coffee.
That's totally good. Yeah. Just walk with me. I'll show you where it is.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay. Just 2 seconds. What's up here?
Are we doing the 3 types of friendship on Thursday?
We sure are. We sure are.
I was like, I know exactly what's going on for the first time. And
Nice.
what a delight. It was great. I'm glad you enjoyed it.